All right, hello everyone. My name is Disc, and in this video we have a 22 Freehold, and for the week cycle we are Fortified, Incorporeal, and Sanguine. So as a priest, we have a couple of spells in our book to manage the Incorporeal. I recommend using Shackle. I think it's a little bit more safe, a little bit more reliable. You can cast it twice if you need to. But conversely, you can use Dominate Mind and have the ghosts work for you. I'm all for min-maxing your spec, and I think it's really great when you can have these things work for you. But I've seen it happen more than once where a Dominate Mind will pull extra mobs, and for the sake of timing keys, I just think it's a little bit of a risk that's unnecessary, so I've just been voting for Shackle. And when it comes to my talents, if anyone follows my videos, you might notice this is quite a bit different than I usually promote. My favorite build is running Mindbender. I think it's really fun. I like an offensive stance as a Disc Priest. But now that I'm pushing into 22s, 3s, and 4s, I'm really just wanting to opt for more defensive points. And I kind of try and grab those in the tree. And I've shifted away from Mindbender into the Aegis of Wrath. So I think both Aegis of Wrath and Wheel and Woe are both great plays. I've looked at Disc Priests above me in IO, and it's a toss-up between both. I think maybe one might be better for Fortified, one might be better for Tyrannical, or maybe you're just more accustomed to one, which I think is beneficial. And the reason I'm going for the Aegis of Wrath, which I have paired with Exaltation, is because I have a UI that is really powerful when it comes to tracking absorbed values. Ones that are full, ones that are low, ones that are crits. And I find that I get a lot of value out of Exaltation, making Rapture, instead of a minor cooldown, a pretty major cooldown. And I've had a lot of success with this. However, I do think I might play around with Blaze of Light and Wheel and Woe a little bit for next week or maybe the week after. But so one thing to note, I don't have Long Schism anymore. I hate it, but I just don't have it. So with Short Schism, we have to really prioritize what our hard hitters are. So with our Schism, we want 1 Dark Reprimand, 2 Mind Blasts, and a Death. And that is going to be your Schism duration. And then I wanted to bring up the subject of Solace versus Bright Pupil. In the comment section, this has been commented on probably more than anything, and I've thought about it to maybe try and give, exact reasoning behind my choice. And I think a lot of healers rely on these upfront reactive heals. So a lot of people are eager to reach for more of this radiance, and I just really, don't think it's fully necessary. Most of my atonement ramps, I use single atonements anyway for their longer duration. I think there's a lot of value in a longer duration spell. I think if you get in a habit of relying too much on radiance, you're going to find you run out of radiance. And then my main reasoning for voting for Solace is what I'm noticing with Disc Priests right now. It's all about hitting your Harsh Discipline, which is 4 casts of anything, pretty much. And sometimes I think that's the hardest thing to do when we're ramping. We have to get dots out, we have to get atonements out, we have to get a Harsh Discipline proc. We just have so much to do. And a Solace is a great way to add 1 tick to your counter, and you don't have to stand still while doing it. So you can do it while you're dodging mechanics. You can do it while, whatever. So I think there is similar value in being able to get into your ramp quicker, maybe getting a proc quicker for a defensive heal or what have you. I just think there's value there as well. And when it comes down to it, I've had Solace bound the same way on my mouse for 4 or 5 years. It's just too much a part of my rotation to want to give it up. And I do think there is a lot of value in it. And just because it's not an upfront heal like Bright Pupil, I think the value is still there. And yeah, that's about it. So When it comes to, I've changed a little bit with my UI, and I want to talk about that really quick. So the first thing I want to say about my combat HUD, and if you watch my videos, you probably have heard me say this over and over and over, I just recommend using action bars for your spells. I think it's a superior option over using a weak aura, mainly because it displays when a button is depressed and released. I think there's a little bit of an advantage there. I think it's nice being able to just reorder spells on the fly if you need to. So yeah, this is just dominoes. I can't share the profile, but it's really easy to set up. And all I wanted to talk about with my change to my UI here is you might notice I don't have Shadow Covenant displayed anywhere. And I still have the keybind for it, but I felt like I could take it off of my action bars since I always play it with Schism, and since Shadow Covenant is the longer of the two cooldowns, my Schism button displays the cooldown of Shadow Covenant. So I'm kind of, whenever I'm going through combat, I'm just really focused on this 30-second counter. That's kind of my system for timing my ramps. I don't need to know the timer of Schism because all that matters is the timer of Shadow Covenant. So from there, now we have Shadow Fiend, now that we've dropped the Mindbender. And I think a pretty common sequence of plays is just to bounce back and forth between Vampiric Embrace and Shadow Fiend. I don't think in this key and Freehold we have really any examples of heavy output that's needed. But let's say you're on the Mammoth boss of Notharis. For the first mutation, you might Vampiric Embrace with your Shadow Covenant. Second, Shadow Fiend. Third, back to Vampiric Embrace, something like that. But with that being said, I think that's all I want to talk about in this intro. So let's go ahead and clip over to the key. All right, so we are about to get going here. Off the top, Theorize, the Demon Hunter, is my friend, so I PI him often. But also I give it to the Evoker a lot just because when it comes to the numbers, they do really well with it. And first up in this pull, we are going to have the Bellows. So I open with a Rapture. And you might notice too on the nameplate of the mob that casts the Shattering Bellows. God, I hate that so much. I've imported a weak aura now that shows the cooldown of enemies' spells attached to their nameplate. And I think that is really, really useful for a handful of spells, the Bellows being one of them. So by default, that add-on will have every single spell loaded, and I think you should disable, honestly, about 98% of them. Similar concepts with Bigwigs. Out of box, when you download Bigwigs, everything will be turned on. I don't think the intention is to keep everything on. I think you should customize it down, minimizing as much as you can. And so here, that was a really good example of the Incorporeal weak aura that I've downloaded, and I kind of hesitate to promote it because it's slightly inconsistent, but it will place a glow on the being until they are CC'd. So if you're in a pug, that might be a really nice way to coordinate. And also in this key, you should take Disease Dispel, and you should take at least one Mass Dispel point. And I did not notice before we started this key, but I have neither. So for that first one, we had a Zephyr and a Wall, and I'm going straight into my Long Rapture. And the really nice thing about this Long Rapture is I can cover one attack and recoat the group with shields for the next attack. And you'll see on the nameplates up there, there's two Bellows showed on the nameplates. That's helping me track the output. And also you'll notice coming up right below my 3D model is that white bar that says Shattering Bellows. I like to have a handful of spells pop up front and center of my screen in a place that they're not moving around to really just help me time my spells. So if you watch when I played that barrier, I laid the barrier midway through the cast. and that was just to get the most value out of it. So with this boss, glancing at available spells, we have nothing. And good thing, because the front part of this boss can be pretty volatile. But yeah, thankfully we are fortified. There's PI on the Demon Hunter. And yeah, I'm trying to get into a better habit of it. I keep going back and forth. I think it's with changing my build so much, I lose the muscle memory. You know, this is where you see me fat for Mass Dispel and I don't have it. So that's a rip. But what was I saying? I forget. But so, one thing I always promote as well is keeping on party nameplates. And I've said that before in Discord with people I'm playing with, and they cringe that I say that. But I honestly think it's because they've not thought about it. And I think in a raid, that is not the answer. But I think in Mythic Plus, it's great to see where your party is as a healer, especially. But I think on a boss like this, where you don't want to draw lines with your allies, being able to see their party nameplate is helpful. But the main reason I say party nameplates for healers is you've probably had it happen to you, and it happens to me all the time too, but you will radiance somebody and you'll only hit 4 of your 5 party members. And that's because you cast radiance on the wrong person. So sometimes in the heat of the moment, you kind of just have to throw radiance. But a lot of times too, I try and look at who is in the middle of the field, and I try and radiance them. So I think as a tank, party nameplate's mandatory. As a healer, party nameplate's mandatory. As a DPS, optional, but I think you should do it. And this is me trying to figure out why my Mass Dispel wasn't working. But anyway, this guy has a Shattering Bellows, so I open with a Rapture just to cover everybody. And it will interrupt your cast, so I wait for after the Bellows and Penance. And that's another reason I bring it up as that little white bar below my 3D model, is because not only is it something where I need to time my heals, I also need to make sure I'm not casting during it. So to be able to see that bar clearly is really important. So this is me reloading. I really had no idea why my Mass Dispel wasn't working. It showed I was spec'd into it on my talent pane, but what I think happened is I was like rebuilding my talents and I never hit activate. So I think that's what happened there. But we've pretty much gotten past all of the Mass Dispel and Disease Dispel points. So we're in the clear now. And with this pull, I don't really bother getting my Harsh Discipline all the way procced, because so many of the mobs in that group will die prematurely. I really just wanted to make sure my Divine Star hit them, and I got that damage grab. Yeah, Divine Star is so important for our book. I do recommend and suggest Divine Star over Halo. I think it fits better within Shadow Covenant, and being an instant cast spell, I just think it's the superior choice for N+. And with this group, you'll notice the one is a darker red. They have the most health. That is a great focus target for your Schism. And you'll also notice in red popping up on my 3D model, Frost Blast. That is a great fear opportunity, but I'm really relying on my group here to do that. And rip. I could have gotten more out of that star, I didn't know we were pulling. But I drop a Paints Up, and I use those couple of seconds to redot the group. And we interrupted the cast there, but if anyone heard that buzz, I think we'll see it later. But the buzz is indicating I'm being focused with the Blind Rage Fixate mechanic. And what we'll see later when the cast actually goes off, the mob who's fixating me will have an effect on their nameplate. So I can really easily keep an eye on where they are and who I'm running from. Also, I might not have said it yet, but Shadow Word Death is probably the most important spell in our book at this time. It is such a hard hitter. There's so much HPS. The more you can pick those out of the field, the better. And also you'll see in group on this boss, we have the targeted casts weak aura. See, I'm targeted right now. I didn't shield myself, but that's the goal. So whenever you see someone like that one, whenever you see someone being targeted with the powder shot, it's a great opportunity for a shield if you have it available. Not getting many of them yet. I think I turned it around. Always try and stand in that little area of effect when you can. Yep, I'm targeted. I was shielded. Now I'm going into a Rapture. This is a really good place where you can see how I'm maximizing my Rapture. I have Grid2, which displays all of my shield values, growing from the left to make them really easily comparable. So I will say, I think in this key it's always best to run with a Paladin. And I almost got boinked because of no Paladin. But quick reaction, paints up, wall for the win. And we're moving on. And so when it comes to Shadow Fiend, I think there are some places where you want to strategically use it. But other than that, I think just keeping it rolling is the best you can do. Trying to maximize it, getting out as much as possible. And these pulls, even though we only did a single, really hurt. So it's not a bad idea to just really spell dump. And you'll see there the tank's getting really low. A play I've been opting for a lot lately with my long Rapture, especially if I'm trying to get a lot of value for my pain sup, is I can go into Rapture and just straight spam the tank. And it acts as kind of a tank saver. So I think I'm dropping some cooldowns here. We have a lot to use. Yep, barriers down. Shadow Fiend is out. Shadow Covenant. Man, Sanguine. So if anyone didn't see, I have not been more excited to play Priest in a while than looking at the upcoming changes to our barrier. So for being such a major spell that it requires someone to stand in it for it to work, nor does it hit the meters, it's kind of it kind of is a weakness in our build, and I think it'll just be a lot better when it just sends out shields in the group. Can't wait. You'll see the nameplate of the guy fixated on me. I tendrils him in place just to buy a little bit of time. And with a large pull like this, I didn't want to trust that someone was going to get the being, so got it myself with a shackle. he got a lot of heal there. Started the event. So yeah, in Discord, you'll see they, so they started with a glow on them, and the glow disappeared when the CC went out. I think that's really nice. But in Discord, between Theorize and myself, we're saying, you know, I'll get one more in the middle, or I got the one near the door. It's a really good strategy. So as a ramp, I'm trying to get a couple of dots out. I need a couple of heals. Nope, I just went for a Radiance. And now I need my Harsh Discipline proc. I dot the healthiest mob. Atonement on the tank is refreshed. And I go into my window. So at the very least, before you go into a Shadow Covenant window, you need to have an atonement on the tank. So if you flash heal him last, for example, at least the two of you will be covered throughout your duration. And there was a defensive penance into the tank. I've said it before, but I think one of the best skills you can have as a Disc Priest is knowing when to defensive penance. And that is the most exciting moment I've had in a long time. I've not caught the pig in years. But a defensive penance is the best single target heal you have. So if you're always kind of fiending for these Harsh Discipline procs, you should a lot of times have one, and a lot of times it's the best way to save a pull. So Shadow Fiend is up, targeted someone that's healthy, Shadow Fiend is out, Schism, Dark Reprimand, and then just pump. And we go into the mini boss. I got ate up there by that shill. There's the fixate on me again. I don't know if I'm sold on that audible, that buzz sound. I think I want a better noise. Or maybe just tone it down a little. It's like really loud. So this guy does count as trash. He is fortified. You want to give him everything you have to get through him. These shells always like scare me, to be honest. Another thing I think I've said it before, and this isn't like a good example of it happening, but in between pulls, the worst feeling to have as a Disc Priest right now is to have a 0 on your Harsh Discipline. So you should always try and set yourself up between pulls to leave with like a 3. So once you get a Harsh Discipline proc, there is a 30-second countdown or you lose it. But if you get a 3 stack without a proc, it holds longer. So if you go to a 3 stack, it's kind of a really nice safe place going into a pull because you're going to have your proc within one cast. And that is the best thing to kind of set yourself up for success, is prepare for the next pull just by ramping your Harsh Discipline. And with this guy, not too much happens on non-tyrannical, but it is best. I always say when it comes to practicing something, may it be like an instrument or a sport, no matter what you're practicing, the best way to practice is by doing something the same way every time and getting a lot of value out of this rapture here. And you might have noticed if you're venturing into higher keys, but then you go back to a lower key, a lot of times people will go into it with the attitude of, oh, it's just a 21 or what have you, and they end up just throwing because they're not doing it the same as they've always done. Nice script there on the Evoker. So even though this is non-tyrannical, even though a 22 isn't like super high for me, it's best just to do your best because that's how you practice. But what I'm getting at is things can get out of hand really quickly on this boss. So I like to always keep the melee atoned the best I can. And you always want to stand by the pools of, like, what is that? Rib cages and blood. So whenever I go into a Shadow Covenant, I do a full atonement ramp just to make sure we're flooding the group with all those heals. And here, Theorize just got double teamed by those sharks. He got 8 up. That boss was down, not a problem. We only have a little bit left, and then we are donezo. Quickly glancing at the DPS meters in my new build, I'm still over 40,000 per second. So my old build, I always pushed for 50,000, and in this build, I'm always pushing for 40,000 as a benchmark. And in this pull, there's a really great opportunity for a Fear Bomb as well. It's called a Thundering Squall. I have it pop up in red, just like all the other ones. And we also have a Dispel on the tank. So there was my fear on the Thundering Squall just to help out. And a defensive Dark Reprimand just to recuperate a little bit of health. This is a large pull to not have a pain sup, but reaching for those double executes really pumps some extra heals when I need it. Yikes, we got 1 stack of that. Ripped him out of the air. But I think at first I forgot about the tank dispel. But I do better on the next group. But if you notice on his party frame, right before the oily whatever goes on him, he is highlighted in white coming from the targeted cast's weak aura. That's the cast of the oily dot. And monitoring it that way is the best way to give it an instant dispel. You really don't want to let that dot linger. And if I were to critique myself on that previous poll, it kind of lingered a little bit too long for my liking and for his liking too, honestly. But on the next group I did a little bit better. And when it comes to working in your Radiant Providence, I think it's best to do it instinctively. However, I've said it before, the more you can delay your cast, the better. It kind of elongates your healing output. So if you can cast something like Solace or Star or your dot refresh before you Radiance, it's kind of a little bit better that way. And at this point, I'm like totally spent, so I'm just giving him some flash heals. And pay attention up here on the tank's bar. You'll see a white dotted line go out. That is my Dispel Q. And I'm anticipating, yep, there was a Bellows here, so I open with Rapture just to cover. And then I recover. Here's my Shadow Covenant. And this was really spooky. I'm glad we didn't have any problems, spoiler alert. But I'm at 20% mana and the tank chained that without looking at my mana. So I kind of have to reserve myself here, but it's always nice to keep health pots on you. I can use Arcane Torrent to regain a little bit of mana. But up top, there's really not much that goes on. I do track only the Whirling Dagger on my bigwigs. And at first it only goes on one person, so it's really not a problem. And that was a defensive Dark Reprimand into myself just to recuperate a little. And I will say, when it comes to like what is most threatening on this boss, I think it's the tornadoes. So if you're not aware of them or ready for them, I might say, they can smack you and one-shot you. So I do have an audible turned on through bigwigs. I'm not tracking its timer though, but I do have an audible to help me, you know, clue into that is happening. So now that we're at the 60% mark, the dagger bleed goes on everybody. So I'm opening with a Rapture. And this Rapture was a little bit early, it looks like, but I was still able to give everyone 2 shields, which is ideal. Yeah, with Rapture, with a long Rapture, I think the best thing you can ever do, really, is give someone 2 shields. And that's what we did there. So I had to wall, but that is okay. That's what it is for. Shadow Fiend is up for a little bit of mana, a little bit of heals. Thankfully, my Radiance hit everybody. Another defensive Dark Reprimand into myself. Just because I have to use my mana wisely. And that is about it. So I still had Barrier in the book. I never really got around to using it. I didn't need to, but it is a great spell to use here. Along with Pain Sup, you can always use that on yourself. It's a great play. And that was a pretty clean Freehold 22 Fortified. So for the week, I've had a lot of really messy keys. I was finally happy to have one recorded that wasn't that messy. And a quick glance at the damage profile for this new build. I think the most important thing here is to note how much damage and healing comes from our Purge the Wicked. So that is a huge subject when it comes to playing a Disc Priest, is managing your dot uptime, using your penance to your advantage to spread your dots, and then in turn using your expiation spells to farm down those dots, sniping out execute ranges whenever you can. That's really going to maximize the spec, keeping your damage high and your HPS high. And again, I'm really excited to go into 10.1.5. I think it's going to be really fun with the change of Barrier, so I really can't wait. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and until next time, Disc out.